everybody. Welcome to Next Level Healing. Today I'm here with Tommy Lawrence. Hi, Tommy.
Hello, Tara. How are you?
Checking in all the way from Australia on the other side of the planet. I was recently a guest on his fabulous podcast called Anxiety Free Podcast, which you can access on, you're on Instagram. What are your podcasting platforms?
So you can find my podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, like all the major platforms. Yeah.
Perfect. And I was very impressed with how personable you were and how kind of open and sharing you are with your experience. How many seasons have you been podcasting for? How many episodes or how many years have you been doing this?
Well, first of all, thank you for being one of my guests. Like, I really love these conversations with you. I actually love being vulnerable because I think that's probably one of the issue with anxiety. We don't let ourselves talk too much and like express our own emotions, and so that's how we have anxiety, I guess, at least for me. And I've had 3 seasons of 10 episodes, so yeah, I've been doing 30 episodes in less than a year.
Well, I'm really impressed because people did reach out to me after being on your show. So you are reaching people, and the depth and breadth of the subjects that you're covering. You've done everything from Kundalini to you had a woman on recently who I was deeply impressed with, who has a company called Beautiful Minds. She goes into children's schools and makes facilities available for them. She's working with Harvard and Stanford. And you guys had discussed on the program how important it is to get to kids because that stuff that gets, I mean, when I'm working with somebody, invariably it goes back to childhood. Even if it seems like it's something from adulthood, there's something anchoring it back to deep into childhood that's actually getting triggered. In fact, today I was listening to Gabor Mate. Do you listen to him at all?
Yeah. I was actually listening to a podcast that I haven't finished, but yeah. I was really, I think, I bought his book, so it's just waiting for me to read his last book.
And you touched on just in the few minutes a very important subject. He was talking about there's a children's book that's got a mole, a horse, and a fox, I think. But in the book, and I'm apologizing, I don't remember the name of the book. It is quite famous, but they ask the horse, who's the most solid member of that little three community, what is the most difficult word to say? And his answer was help. It was really difficult to ask for help. So especially for men, and I know you've talked about this in your podcast, a lot of our men in our society are taught to not have feelings, to just be strong, to be invulnerable. And one of the keys to dancing with and resolving this childhood trauma is to not necessarily to dwell on your feelings, but at least feel them. Do you want to talk about that and what you've uncovered in your podcast episodes about that?
Yeah, well, I think what I uncovered as well is that sometimes the biggest trauma are not the one that stayed. Like sometimes even the little things and the little situation in your childhood that if you live it now, it wouldn't have the same impact. But when you were a kid, it does have an impact. Like I remember, let's say, for instance, my mom being divorced from my dad, but insulting my dad over the phone, and then I could hear the conversation, and my dad was looking at me and say, "See, that's your mom." That's something that normally, if I have it now, it wouldn't have the same impact on me. But I was 10 back then, and I still remember exactly, and I think I still have some issues about that. So that's one of the things. So sometimes it's just like little things that tend to cause anxiety or even like a trouble in mental health.
What about that incident stayed with you? What do you feel like developed a trigger? What was uncomfortable about that persisted into adult life and was troubling?
I didn't really like the behavior of my dad. doing that, because I know that even if my mom insulted my dad, I know why. I know why he did, and I didn't like the behavior. Yeah, just didn't like the behavior of my dad, which I think caused problem with me and my dad later. Not to be that close, etc. Which is much better now. But I know that like during my what I was a teenager, it yeah it affected for sure.
So tell us about your journey dealing with anxiety, because it started like most people with the chronic anxiety early on. What was your experience? When did you first realize it was a problem? When did you start reaching out to solve it? And when did you start your podcast?
Okay, so in a nutshell, um, I started to have anxiety when I was 26. I was living a very fast-paced life in Paris, and then that was on a Sunday night. I started to have a panic attack randomly watching TV, and I thought I would die at the beginning, but then I called some friends, and some friends came over, and one of them was like, "Oh, you have a panic attack," and I'd never heard of this word before. So I was like, "Okay, great." But then what I didn't know is that I would, uh, it would start to for me not to be okay for a couple days, week, month, and years. It was all the beginning. So what I did at the very first is that obviously I went to the pharmacy. I was trying to find some help to just to calm me down. But then when I see that it was going worse and worse, I was anxious all the time. It was terrible for me to take the transport in Paris. Not that it's terrible, but it
Was
things
it
that
was
I
it
was doing.
claustrophobia? A lot of people when they're in a enclosed
It's just
space.
I thought it was it's a it's claustrophobia, but it's also the fact that I was scared that I would have a panic attack surrounded by people I didn't know, and how they would react to me, and it's like anxiety, and I was anxious about anything that could happen to me. Um and I knew that it was an issue because obviously like a few months before everything was fine, everything was all right. So moving forward, I went to see a therapist for a little bit, but I took some medication as well. Or like I was taking some Xanax to calm, sorry, my panic attacks. When I had panic attacks, I was trying not to be on a antidepressant, because I was like, I knew what it's about. I know what it's happening. I've had psoriasis for more than 10 years now, and I was like, okay, my body wants to say something to me. We're gonna let it out. Um, and and then yeah, I went to see a therapist. I did some hypnotherapy. I went to see life coaches and yada yada yada. And then at the end, I turns up to be in Australia, because I so that happened in 3 years' time, pretty much. And I turned out to come to Australia because I realized that my life in Paris probably wasn't as good as I wanted. Even though I loved my friend and everything, but I think I was surrounded within too much negative energy, and I needed to be back to nature and just like leave the fullest, but somewhere else. So to break everything, it was the best for me to move very far away. I even thought about moving to Madrid, and was like, from France. I was like, that's probably not going to be a greatest experience for me. So let's go somewhere where there's a nice beach,
Mhm.
where it's beautiful, when there's nature, and my generalized anxiety disorder, because that's what I had, stopped a few months later. Went back to normal. And even though 6 months after arriving in Australia, there were COVID. So COVID was like a big period of stress and anxiety for everyone, but not for me.
Wonderful. That's a huge takeaway. Because well, like you, COVID was one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it while it was stressful and it required different life circumstances, it ended up being so much better because it forced me to get really real about what was the most important. And by focusing on that, my life just exponentially got better.
Yeah. What I did during COVID is because so I've lost my two jobs the same day. Um, so I was just doing nothing and I was just arriving. I basically had no friends in Australia and my family was asking me to be back. And I was like, well, at least here I have like a nice house. So I can just walk to the beach if I want. So I think I'm gonna stay there. Like I was just arriving literally like 5, 6 months after. So I was like, no,
And
I'm gonna
what,
stay here.
at what point in that move did you realize that you didn't have a problem with the generalized anxiety disorder?
Um,
Was it instantaneous? Was it a few weeks later? Was it a few months later? At what point did you realize that you had made the right decision?
I think I have several signs. It's just I could feel anxiety every day for no reason. I could feel like I don't know how to explain like the feeling of anxiety. Really, sometimes I was just like too much stressed about anything. My heart would race about nothing. Sometimes I would knock, I don't know, my hand against the table or something like that, and I would think that I would die because of that. And at some point, that didn't happen anymore. Also, used to have tension headaches for more than a year, like constantly every day. Uh, I stopped to have them, which stopped me the anxiety of having something as well. And what I did during COVID that no one ever told me to do, which is pretty good thing, I guess, for anxiety, and I'm talking this about a lot, is journaling. But I didn't start journaling for my mental health. I started journaling because I was like, okay, we are living an important period in our lives. I want to remember it. And I'm going to write every day what I was doing, everything that I'm seeing on TV, and etc., etc. So I was writing every day, and then turns out that it was like I felt so good every time that I was writing, and I was getting excited to write again about the fact that I was doing nothing every day. You know, and then I feel like that this is something that I keep today. Every time that I'm feeling very happy, very sad, very angry, when I'm having an intense emotion, I go on the book and I'm just writing pages, and it's like a therapy for myself, which is very good.
Beautiful. So when you moved from Paris to Australia, how long did
Yeah.
it take for the anxiety symptoms to go away?
I mean, I would say when I arrived in Australia, like it was a few months of like settled down just to make sure that I moved from city as well. I was living in Melbourne. I moved to Sydney because I didn't like Melbourne that much. I think 4 months, 4, 5 months.
Beautiful. And what
Yeah,
inspired
because COVID was in March. Yeah.
and what inspired you to start podcasting? Because it's such a delicious thing for me when people take something that's been a challenge for them and then share that with other people. That's why I started recording, people going through my process, because I wanted other people to know there was relief for them. So what was the inspiration for you to start podcasting?
Um, when I had anxiety, I have a big following on Instagram. I started to talk openly about my mental health and say, well, I have anxiety. That's what's happening. That's what I'm trying. And I never received like as much engagement. So that was years and years ago. And then from time to time, I would tell people, okay, that's what's been happening lately. That's what I've been trying. I'm feeling better. I'm feeling worse, blah, blah, blah. And a year ago, I think like a friend who is not much of a friend, it's just like someone I know came to me and talked to me about his anxiety, and I was surprised. I was like, well, but why do you talk to me about this? And then it was like, oh, I remember that you used to talk about this, and then I know that just because you lived it, you would understand. And then and he didn't talk to anyone. He didn't see any specialist. He didn't see anyone. And then I was like, okay, well, here's what you're going to do. and you need to stick to it, blah blah. And I just gave him a few things. I was like, okay, if that's okay, if you feel like this, if you think you're dying, that's okay, that's normal. And and then it did help him, and I always check up on him sometimes. And so I was like, oh, I was thinking about like a business idea, and I was thinking about creating this podcast. So at the very beginning, that was just my own experience, um, and then I wanted to talk with people about anxiety, saying that okay, so if I'm vulnerable about mine, I'm gonna try to and make people vulnerable talking about this to make it like mental health issues is for everyone.
Hmm. And what would you say to men out there in particular? Because I do love interviewing men, particularly because generally it's considered not okay for them to talk about their feelings,
Yeah.
and yet by just, again, not wallowing in them, but at least feeling them and understanding why they're there, they're able to, shed them and move on. So what would you say to men specifically about the need to feel your feelings?
It's very hard because like when you're growing up and then you say, oh, men shouldn't cry, blah blah blah. So there's a lot of like misconception about what a man should do and shouldn't do, and like uh living their emotion is really not something that you shouldn't do as a man for absolutely no reason, I guess. But that's something that you keep telling like over the years. Um and I feel that, so I'm gay, and we've been living through during the childhood, we've been living through a lot of issues with our sexuality, and then when we're coming out to our parents and friends, it's already talking about your own emotions. And sometimes for most of us, we've been bullied at school as well, things that we don't talk as well. And still to this day, sometimes there's some people that are not happy, they don't want to talk about it, even the schools was 20 years ago. But I feel that I don't know if men's are opening up enough right now. Like I'm still listening. I'm still see. I'm not listening to them. I'm still seeing some like podcasts about men. So yeah, you need to be strong. Blah 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 blah. And it's really hard. So that's why I wanna try to open this conversation. And in my podcast, like one of my goals would be to get whatever men, and just so they can just open up about themselves and then who they are. There's a lot of big podcasters who are doing it right now with like CEOs of company, and I think that's great because most of the time we don't talk about our issues, our problem. I feel like women are a bit more open about that, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah, but it doesn't seem that just by being aware of your feelings, it makes you weak. It actually, to me, I think it's a sign of strength to know that you
It's
have
strength, yeah.
the willingness to look at the monster underneath the bed. Because I have a strong Chinese medicine background, and there's a very famous idea in Chinese medicine that it's not the stiff, hard tree that is the strongest. It's the willow that can survive the winds and the monsoons of life. So yeah, just so being stiff and hard can make you break rather than being able to flow and move with life.
Yeah, and especially during COVID, I could see some people sometimes that I briefly knew suicide, and and to me, I mean, I understand why people would be suicide, but I was like, well, this is your mind. It's your mind that won against you,
Yeah,
and
that is gold what you just said there, because as my meditation teacher would say, you can't be sad, depressed, anxious, anything without first having a thought.
yeah, exactly. Like it's coming from you. You can probably have the worst life. I mean, I've lost my mom when I was 15. Like I didn't live a lot of great things in my life, but I'm still here and standing because I think my life is worth it. Like, but I do understand that sometimes it can be hard, but it just turned to the perception to have it and um to make sure that like you get the lessons out of it, and then it makes you a stronger person that would understand. I have honestly when I had anxiety and my psoriasis, I didn't really like the job that I was doing. At some point, my friendship were a mess. I was like, this is very hard right now, but I fought for it. I was like, I knew how I was before. I was like, I want to be back to this guy, or probably even better.
I love that you were open-minded enough to realize that perhaps the physical symptoms was a sign of something going on in your psyche. How did you put that piece together? Because I so often see this, and it's so wonderful that when you help somebody go from being high sympathetic to back into parasympathetic, which is a much more normal, healthy state, that all the physical symptoms can get better. What was your tip off that the physical symptom, because in Western culture, we're trained that if we have a physical symptom, we run to the doctor and get a prescription, which,
I know.
if you read the side effects, then, you take a drug and you get one effect that you want and about, 10, 20, 30 effects you don't want. So maybe that's not the healthiest thing in the world to do. However, if you get to the root of the mental, emotional, physical, or mental, emotional, spiritual problem behind it, then if the symptoms go away, then you've really solved the problem holistically. So what was your tip off that there was more than just a pharmaceutical drug you would benefit from?
So it all started really with my psoriasis. I used to have a psoriasis everywhere on my body, everywhere.
How many years ago?
From um when I was 20, so 13 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's a few months after my grandmother passed. Um, and but at the beginning, I didn't understand. I didn't know what it was. I was just like, oh, this is just like another skin issue. But I went to so at the beginning, you have some cream, and then I went to see a dermatologist at the hospital in south of France because that's where I was living at that time, and he told me, okay, well, I'm gonna give you some like medicine, so it's gonna block completely because I used to literally be everywhere and I wouldn't go out. And then he told me, okay, so I'm gonna give you some things for your skin, but just make sure that on your side you work on this because that's the issue. And I was like, okay. And I remember that my very first time going to a therapist, I was 21, and when he asked me, okay, what's your issue? And I got undressed. And then I was like, yeah, that's my issue. And I was like, I need to make sure I don't have this anymore. And so that's how we like start digging into things. And obviously, like with my treatment, it blocks my psoriasis. So even right now, I'm still on the treatment. You can't see anything. That's why I think that I still have some issues that I need to work on. But there's a lot of things that happen in between that I know that I'm probably now ready to do it. To really work on like past emotions. But yeah, that's how it happened. So that's why when I had my anxiety, it was just a few months after, and I got a new treatment that would completely block my psoriasis, and I was like, oh, I understand.
So when you say a new treatment, are we talking about a drug intervention or
Yes.
there? Okay.
Yeah. That was an injection that I would put that I would take every 3 months, and yeah, completely like you wouldn't guess I have psoriasis.
Wonderful. Very good. So in the series of doing your podcast, what did you find to be the most valuable thing, either for you or for your listeners?
I really loved talking with people and talking about the same thing. That's the thing. Talking about the same experience, so sometimes the same sensations, and sometimes to share some tips, and also saying that different story happen, and then we all tend to live pretty much the same thing. And sometimes what I wasn't really saying at some point, but I was interviewing a few of my friends as well, and that we never talked about anxiety before, and most of them were reaching out to me and say, hey, if you're looking for a guest, maybe I can be one of them. And I was like, oh really, why? And I was like, no, because I have anxiety. One of them told me, oh, I really have like bad anxiety. I even committed suicide a few years ago. And I was like, oh, okay. So what I really loved is that when people were so vulnerable that I could talk, that I could ask questions very deep and sometimes um, very, I mean, that could disturb them. But there was, or they would always answer to me. I never had to cut anything from what I said in my episodes. And I know from the fact that a lot of my guests were talking to me at the end, say, "Oh my God, that was like a therapy session. I loved it." But even my listeners were sending me messages saying that, "Wow, like that was very powerful." So I love the feedback on my guests, but also my listeners. But like, if I have a great moment with my guests, that's what was matter for me.
Beautiful. Wonderful.
I guess
So
it's the same for you.
For me, it was, I just wanted to get the message out that healing was available, and it can be a lot faster than people thought. I find that the subconscious mind has a lot of the answers, where that little 5 to 10% of our brain, that's the conscious mind, doesn't have the answers. So, and yeah, it does get nailed in there back in childhood, at some point in childhood. And like you said, it could be something very small. I have a client who's a neurosurgeon and brilliant, but never felt comfortable asking for money for what she did, even though she was, an amazing, accomplished woman. Well, it went back to childhood where, her sister was even smarter than she was. So the father said something unkind to her. I guess he was just having a bad day. He wasn't a bad dad, but she took that as, well, I'm not good enough. And silly as that is, it got cemented in there until we did a session and went back and she could see it. And then I always say people are like iPhone 14s operating on iPhone 4 technology, and it's just old technology that needs to get updated. We fire and wire that same old strong feeling, because the brain is, thinks that's familiar, and it's just going to keep doing that until it has the tools to change.
Yeah, and to say that, like, after the conversation we had, like, I really realized a lot of things like that, and so that's why at the moment I'm about to start a therapy, because I really want to like touch into some unsolved problem. That's also like one of the outcome of my podcast. I was like, oh, okay, I've learned a lot of new things. So even for me, it was great to learn this, because once again, I'm not a therapist. Like I probably haven't said that, but I'm not a therapist. I'm just some guy with anxiety.
Well, but it's beautiful that you're creating this conversation and you're creating the community, because clearly people want that and are receptive to it and appreciate it.
Yeah, and I know you had anxiety in the past, so like you would understand, right? But I was always saying to some people were asking, but why do you starting your podcast? And I was like, well, sometimes the experience, and that was the title of my first episode, my experience matters. Just to say that I don't have the studies, but at least I have lived experience, and I can talk about what I've been living and like the lessons that I had from there.
Well, I think there's huge value in that. When we went into UCLA, and I was the first acupuncture teacher at the Arthur Ashe Center, and we didn't show them a bunch of studies in order to convince them that it was effective. We treated the people who made the decisions, because once you've lived something, once you've experienced something, your ability to disseminate that information becomes very rich.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, completely.
So, what would you like? So the biggest takeaway that you got from doing the interviews, from getting the feedback, I think one of the things that's very notable about you is the friendliness, the acceptance, the lack of judgment, and I think you've just created a very nice place where people can feel safe and have a conversation about something that maybe they didn't feel comfortable talking about before.
Yeah, thank you. Well, yeah, it's true that people were very willing to talk to me about everything, and I've always wanted to like talk about anxiety in a way that it's nice to people. That even if it's a hard topic, I didn't want to be like the podcast that it's like, "Ugh." Yeah, like I still want it to be like a podcast that you want to listen to. So that's why sometimes we were laughing a few times on the podcast, for sure. So yeah, I always trying to make it a bit easy for people, and that's also who I am. Like, I'm someone who's always smiling. I'm always making fun of people, like in front of the people, never. But like, so, and I really wanted this to be me.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, your last one where you talked about gratitude, I thought was beautiful. And also being grateful for the anxiety itself, because then you're not making it an enemy, you're befriending it. And for me, that's very much an outcome from when you do connect to the subconscious mind and what's going on there. It's very not helpful to fight it, to make an enemy of it, to ignore it, to bury it. It's very helpful to befriend it, hear it, love it, appreciate it for whatever it is. Sometimes it's just exhausted and it wants to retire.
yeah. No, but it's true. It's true. I really wanted to do this episode about being grateful, because that's what I am with this podcast. Like it like even though I have like a job all the time, every day, like another job, like every time that I was finishing an interview, I was feeling very well, and I was saying, okay, like this is gonna be great. Like we have a good conversation. This is gonna help people as much as it helped. It just helped both of us, because even though I don't have a high level of anxiety right now, I just have what I feel is just a normal level. Um, I still appreciate this conversation about me, and also thinking that, oh, I wasn't crazy back then. I was just being normal. I just had like a mental health issues, but like just to seeing it from far away now, and still to be able to talk about it. Like I was kind of grateful when I did this podcast, but also um if I didn't have all these issues, etc., like I probably wouldn't be here with everything that happened in my life. You know what I mean? So if I didn't take care of myself, probably I would be under antidepressant for many years, etc. And there's a lot of people who take. I mean, it's so easy to take antidepressant and live your life. It's also way cheaper, and it's way harder. Way easier. No, sorry, way easier for sure. That's sad.
Easier in the long run or easier in the short run?
Oh, easy in the short run. Like I have the pharmacy in front of my
Right.
apartment. So and also like you don't want to talk about yourself from time to time. Like well, just what I was saying to you before we started recording. Like I'm studying some EMDR therapy, which is a therapy I've never tried before. But to between the idea and taking the decision, so probably a few weeks, because I was deciding, okay, what was the best thing for me? Do I really want to do this? I was just like figuring out what I wanted to do with myself, and then I was like, okay, well, stop. I was like, you have a podcast about anxiety where you tell people like to take care about themselves. If you don't take about yourself right now, listen to your podcast. And that's what I did, and I know I'm going to be better in a few weeks for sure.
Well, fantastic. Well, I can't wait to hear your experience of that when you resurface from it. And thank you so much for sharing your story and for reaching out and um, sharing your story so that other people can benefit from your journey.
Well, but thank you. And once again, I'll be very happy to have this conversation with you. Thank you, Tara.
Wonderful. Is there anything else you want people to find? Is there a social media outlet that you want them to find you on, or we'll list them here, of course.
Yeah. Well, they can find me on the social media, Tom Graham, or even like listen to my podcast, the Anxiety Free podcast. So yeah, I'm taking a break from it at the moment, but like when I'll be back, surely I want to have more conversations with people. So if people are willing to talk with me, well, just let me know.
Thanks so much. Thanks for coming on the show, Tommy. And if you liked this episode and got benefit from it, please click like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode of Next Level Healing.